Hey everybody, welcome back. I am your host, and today we will be discussing the Leprechaun movies. And I'm going to avoid a lot because I didn't do a lot of research on this to get the years. Because the Leprechaun movies, basically, the first four came out almost back to back, and then they put like some that were out there with a space apart. I will go over the synopsis of them and some good and bad for them. But let's begin with the first movie of Leprechaun. One very notable thing about this, Jennifer Aniston before she did Friends and before the Rachel haircut took over as a popular fashion trend, which I don't understand. Maybe somebody could explain it to me. Look, I know my hair doesn't look great, but then again, I'm not one to care about how my hair looks, so that could be why. Anyways, it starts out in the movie an old man has trapped a leprechaun while he's in Ireland. He comes home with a pot of gold. He comes home not only with the pot of gold that he's put into a small pouch, apparently. How you fit what was a crock of gold, as the leprechaun called it, and you can see it when he calls it a crock of gold. It's this big pot. The leprechaun, but yeah, it fits into a pouch. The croc's about this big. The pouch, about this big. Anybody see a problem in holding the gold? All the gold in that? Anyways, the man followed the traditional rule. You find the leprechaun's gold, you get to keep it. However, the leprechaun not so nice about giving up the gold and following the rules. So he follows him back from America. He tries to get it back. Unfortunately, that didn't work out so well as the leprechaun got trapped into a bag of all things in on the way back. The man had purchased a limo, he purchased a mansion, but before he even told his wife about how they were going to be living this great life. Well, this leprechaun kills the wife, and when the man decides to get rid of the leprechaun, he uses one of the oldest traditions to hurt the leprechaun, a nice four-leaf clover. While the four-leaf clover does scare the leprechaun and hurt its power, amazingly, a bullet can't do jack to this thing. You figure with the weakness from the four-leaf clover, it'd have some effect. Well, he lasts long enough to be knocked out. Eventually, from the gunshots. He gets trapped in a crate, four-leaf clover on top to make sure he can't use his magic and escape or heal his wounds. At the moment this is done, the old man has a heart attack. Has a stroke after nailing him in the crate. Well, 10 years later, Jennifer Aniston's character moves in, and her father moved to the house. where they meet some painters who are doing the house, cleaning it up, getting it ready for them to move in. And one of the painters happens to let the leprechaun loose by accident. Well, while they're out, two of the painters end up finding the leprechaun's gold, and once again inciting the leprechaun's wrath. This movie particularly was very reliant on the legend of the four-leaf clover and how important the gold was. Now, for the second one, it starts out back in the day on St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, where where the leprechaun is now searching for a bride. Well, while searching for said bride, he now looks upon this beautiful woman and has this slave of his look at her. Turns out it's the slave's daughter that he hasn't seen in years. Well, the deal is, once the leprechaun gets his bride, the slave goes free. And one of the more interesting catches to it is that when the leprechaun sneezes 3 times, unless there is somebody to say, God bless you, he owns her. I don't know where that rule came in. It's an interesting rule and a messed up one, showing how devious the leprechaun works. I think that one was thrown in just to show the darkness. But upon the third, the slave actually, the slave slash father actually did it. Actually chose his daughter's life over his and said, God bless you, and took off. Unfortunately, the collar around his neck, not exactly the best way to try and escape, as it acted like both a tracer and um, a nice little regular collar. Leprechaun made it into a new style hold, and while holding him up in the air, and then he cursed the family that he would follow the bloodline until he met his bride, which, oddly enough, would eventually lead him to the lovely city. I can't remember if it's Los Angeles or Las Vegas in this story, in the second Leprechaun movie, by the way, that we're in. But it does follow the family as he found the girl, pulled the stunt on her, but as is the generational loss down the line in kindness, nobody thought about the sneezing leading to a God bless or anything like that. So the leprechaun was ready to claim her as his. Only thing the leprechaun didn't count on is one, the girl being crafty, and two, the boyfriend's love actually being that much stronger and actually willing to fight for the woman he loved. Even if it meant going up against something that's so powerful. Now, something I found odd in this one, the Leprechaun had his 99 gold coins. He had one coin short. Well, when he got trapped in a safe, in the first movie, he appeared coming out of a safe at one point without it harming him. But in the second one, he was in a safe, and any spot he would touch would burn him. This actually follows the traditional leprechaun belief. Same as it does with demons and ghosts. Wrought iron, like a fire poker or something like that, where it's pure, where it's old and it's pure iron. That's basically why it was called wrought iron, is because it was old. But it's pure iron is the reason why. And the idea is somehow the pureness of the iron actually drives them away or harms them. So while it was touching all these spaces and getting hurt, the friend of the boyfriend tried to get the gold with his greed. Well, unfortunately, when he did that, he was stupid because he never said how to get the gold, so the leprechaun tricked him and put the gold in his stomach. Well, in order to get it out, the leprechaun tricked him again. Told him he'd have to let him out. And treated that as a second, and treated that as a wish rather than. I see, the deal is with a leprechaun, you get one wish if you trap them. A lot of people would go for the gold. Well, he went for the gold. The other problem is the guy killed him. I mean, he killed the guy and told him he used his wish already when he asked for the gold, telling him about how greed is a bad thing. But one gold piece got loose. The boyfriend wound up with it. Now, this is where it got a little confusing because when the leprechaun tried to harm him, apparently the gold's magic protected him and made him immortal, where he couldn't be harmed as long as he had the gold piece. But when it came down to it, the boy had to choose which was more important, the gold, the girl, or just killing the leprechaun in general. That was a good one. Okay, the first two, really great. The third one, it gets severely. That one they just went too much comedy with. Because in the third one, the leprechaun goes to Vegas. I mean, come on, you're already in a city of sin and gold and deceit. Again, his gold winds up here. He's trying to get it back. But this time it's about a magician. A kid who wants to be this great magician. But because the kid's own greed is taking over him personally, he's starting to become a leprechaun on his own. So now, eventually, the kid has to decide: let the greed take over, and he loses his humanity, or get rid of the leprechaun and the gold and be himself as he was. Though the movie is simple in that context, overall it was drawn out and it could have eliminated time. A lot of it, actually, with the way it did things. And it also had unnecessary blood and gore, as well as nudity. And there's a particular sex scene involved it really didn't need. Now, as for the fourth movie, which takes place in the future, now this one was actually good, even though it's another one of those that came around in the towards the millennium, towards the 2000s when everything was going into space, like Jason X and things like that. Anyways, Jason and Hellraiser both went to space, so apparently this one felt it had to. Guess Chucky wasn't available. But anyways, when Leprechaun's in space, again, it takes a bit of the second one, where he's searching for a bride. He wants to marry the princess of this planet. Well, the fun part of this, her dad's paid this military unit to take her back and bring her home. They're getting like this major price for it. Well, after they get her, the leprechaun decides he wants her back. He even managed somehow to fake his death in the process of this. And they thought they killed him. But when they're back on the ship, the leprechaun reveals he didn't die. In one of the most interesting ways. As he does a surprise. And also does a PSA on sexual advice. Now, when it comes to the girl, the princess that they were set to rescue, the doctor was running checks on her. Well, he finds out that her blood is very special. Turns out her blood combined with somebody else's DNA can actually reproduce parts that were lost. And this doctor that's so messed up on so many levels, as he's basically just parts. They're kept alive by machines, is now planning to use her to make himself human. Well, the leprechaun finds her. He decides he wants to marry her. He's going to take over the kingdom. Well, his plan is he's going to take over the kingdom, kill her on the wedding night at the same time. Her plan is she's going to marry him, have him kill her father, and then she's going to kill him. and take over the kingdom. Lovely little family, aren't they? The movie actually does really well. It might be a little bit lengthy in time, but it mixes the comedy, the horror. It actually does it nicely. And it even throws in some weirdness in there just to keep you on your toes. Well, then comes the next two movies called Lep in the Hood. The first one starts out with a preacher who is taking what was left of the gold and is dumping it in concrete that hasn't fully settled yet. And the thing is, this this Leprechaun has been around since before the Middle Ages. He used to defend the castle. Well, this leprechaun was dark and greedy. When all the other leprechauns went back into the woods, this one stayed in the castle. Its heart, over the years, became dark and it became twisted. And all it wanted was the gold that it held. And like I said, the preacher used the gold for good deeds, but the leprechaun reminded him wrong things done for the right reason are still wrong. Something that's interesting in this movie is that they have this now magic flute as well as a magic um, necklace. This necklace they have turns him into a statue. I don't know where the necklace came from. I have no idea how that got set up. The flute, however, that they have is actually a good thing. As when they use it, it actually helps them. It isn't that it hurts the leprechaun, but more it can help get people to be, I don't know the actual term I want to say, is it's not submissive, but open to suggestion. Although this one does bring back the leprechaun smoke, the leprechaun, the four leaf clover being a trouble thing, because a problem that comes up in the film, they do smoke a lovely little cigarette, shall we say? And it's laced with four leaf clovers. Where you find a four leaf clover in downtown, in that part of town, I'd like to know. In that city, I'd like to know. Because that would be an interesting thing. But this movie does reinforce a lot of stereotypes, which could be why it didn't do well in theaters or in the video sections. And then there's Lep in the Hood 2. Basically the same idea as one, only with some slight changes. After this, Dionne Warwick, who had played, no, I'm sorry, not Dionne Warwick. Sorry, my mistake, misspeak. Warwick Davis, who had played the Leprechaun through these 5 movies, would not return to play the role. Not that I blame him. Not that I blame Davis, because Those last two, they were just wrong in general. And 3 and 4, I said, though 4 is good, you could have done without 3 and 4. And now for 5, now for the 7th one they made, I don't know what they were thinking when they made this. It was supposed to be the origins for Leprechaun. Leprechaun Origins was the name of it. Basically, all it was you got to see a new actor playing this Leprechaun and taking over, being a killer. There wasn't really any story to it. What's really bad is it didn't even go to theaters or video at the time it was released. It was put on the Sci-Fi Channel for its direct release, which means they either didn't have faith that it would do well, or they were really hoping people would care that it was a Leprechaun movie and just be interested in that. Now, the 8th film they released, they went back to the idea of it being Leprechaun, of the original Leprechaun movie, only it's 20 years later. The daughter of Jennifer Aniston's character is going to college. Well, she's on summer break, and at least I think it's summer break. She's on. It's something about it. But she's there to help make the house more energy efficient, as they call it, as it's referred to. Using those nice solar panels, wind fans, things like that, so that the electricity and all that's taken down. Well, we get the return of Ozzy from the first film, one of the painters, and a we get the return of the original version of the Leprechaun, even though but the thing about this scene, the thing about this one is the Leprechaun's back to the original style, though it does bring up the second movie's option also of the iron, so it at least kept it honest this time. Though, in my opinion, Warwick Davis needed to return for this film, and it would have worked better. Because to me, nobody made a better Leprechaun than Davis. Davis knew how to throw in the comedy and the horror, even when playing a horror scene where it was gory and bloody, or where it was wrong. They could be fun. The moment could be funny with the way with the way it was done. But anyways, that's my analysis of the films. Let me know what you thought of the Leprechaun franchise, and even if you think they should make more of them. Till next time.